So this is our last panel of the day here, and we are chatting sustainable data centres. It is my absolute honour to be joined by Helen Munro, Head of Environment and Sustainability at Pulsant, Stina, Head of Sustainability at Bulk Infrastructure Group, Louise Alter, Sustainability Director at nLighten, and Andy Palmer, Data Centre and AI Infrastructure Group at Seagate. If we can have a round of applause for our panellists, please.
Thank you.
Perfect. So if we can start off, Andy, do you want to kick us off and just introduce yourself and a bit about where you've come from?
Yeah, so I work for Seagate, as we've said. We have a slightly different view of this market because we're not operating or designing or building data centers. We are selling to your customers who are bringing their own IT infrastructure into the data centers. So it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining us. And Stina?
Yeah, thank you. All the way from Norway. Happy to be here. So Bulk is a Nordic developer and operator of data centers and fiber networks. So data centers at scale for AI in Norway and Denmark in ambition to grow. So, yeah.
Awesome. Louise?
Cool. Hi, so I'm Louise. I'm Director of Sustainability at nLighten. We're an edge data, co-location data center. We operate around all of Europe, so we're present in 8 countries and we have 36 locations overall. And I look after everything sustainability and energy for the business.
Perfect. And Helen?
Yes, I'm Helen Munro. I'm Head of Environment and Sustainability for Pulsant. So we've got a UK-wide platform of 14 edge data centers.
Amazing. So some really great different perspectives here, hopefully, for a great discussion. I'm going to throw you just an absolutely massive question to start off with. Obviously, we know that AI-driven demand is growing really fast. Have we reached a point where sustainability and AI growth are fundamentally at odds? Or do you anticipate that technology innovation is going to be able to bridge that gap? Helen, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. If we take the macro scale, right? Technology alone is not sufficient for sustainability. Technology can get us so far along the way, but it's actually where you combine technologies and behavioral changes that we are seeing the pathways to fully decarbonising and bringing everything back into balance. So no, technology is not enough.
And what do you think?
Yeah, I can add on that. I think, yeah, of course, AI is in growth, but then you have power and land that's constrained resources. So you need to find the balance there. And I think the ones that will be able to find that balance and deliver it in a respectful way will favor. I think that will be licensed to growth going forward. So, and no, I don't think technology will lose or solve the whole problem itself. I think you need to combine that. So it needs to start with location, and you need to make an assessment all the way through. But of course, I think AI will also help us into the design process and into optimizing the operations as well.
Louise?
So I think, I think there's sustainability and AI are kind of at odds today just because of the speed at which AI is happening and growing and the demand for AI. Even if people don't really have the same definition of what AI even is, kind of the speed of that demand and the speed of sustainability projects overall, or kind of the requirement for projects to be sustainable, are not kind of, the speed is just not the same. And so I actually think that for the moment, if AI keeps growing like that, and at the same time there isn't that same demand of growth in sustainability, I think they will just separate. And I think it's really nice to think that AI will really help us on the sustainability journey. But today I don't see it. And so I think that there's a real need for the industry to take responsibility, because clearly regulation is not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it in Europe. It's not going to cut it in the US, and they're kind of the main drivers. In China maybe, but today, it's really for the data center operators and owners to take responsibility if they want to deliver sustainable AI.
And Andy?
I don't think that they are at odds. There's certainly tension. I think technology should go a long way to solve a lot of things, but you're right, there's also the human and the physical side of things as well that needs to be dealt with, let's say. And data, the whole point about AI, it rests on data, and data is growing, and depending on which market research report you read, it's going to be about 400 zettabytes by 2028. That is what we're going to create in a year. You think, well, what's a zettabyte? It's a strange word. What's 400? It's not a very big number. But if you were to think about zettabytes in terms of bits of data, this is if you take your phone out and type any character on your screen, that's about a bit of data. So a word, so the letter A, for example, four letters is a nibble, 8 letters is a byte. So we've done the work. We have, pointlessly, but it just illustrates a great point, we've taken the average, an average of a handful of grains of sand, and using our micrometer, we've managed to work out what the volume is, and therefore we can work out roughly how many grains of sand there are on the Earth. Right now, even if we're 1 trillion grains of sand out, it's okay. It's a big enough margin of error. And sometimes the tide's in, sometimes the tide's out, but you get my point in a minute. And if you were to think about bits of data, there are more, as grains of sand, there are more bits of data than there are grains of sand on the Earth. In fact, there are more bits of data in 400 zettabytes than there are grains of sand on 22,000 Earths. So this is the kind of thing that we're trying to grapple with. Now, is that going to be stored? Is that going to be in data centers? The answer is no. Roughly 10% of it is what gets stored. Most of it gets created and deleted straight away. It's not necessary to keep it. But even 10% of 400 zettabytes is a phenomenal amount of data storage needed. And there will be an impact. And it's how we work together as an industry. Both, if you consider me on the client side, I'm the guy, bringing the stuff in the racks, the hard drives into the racks that your clients are using. If we can work together and architect properly, there are certain trade-offs we can make that will definitely help us.
That scale is just mind-blowing, isn't it? As we see this demand, I mean, like we've said, doesn't really show any signs of stopping. As we see it continue to grow, how can we be thinking about the role of data centers in society? Stina, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I think that would change, that we need to see ourselves in a more holistic view. It's not just PUE and managing, optimizing the data center. We need to also deliver ripple effects outside of the data center where we are located, working closely with the local community. I think it will be the society expecting even more from us and how we engage in that. And I think for bulk, we're building long-term industry as a cornerstone company, and that means that you will need to handle all these with respect. Otherwise, you will not get the license to play. So I think it will be expected more from us. Example, how we are part of the energy system, right? We've been talking about that through the day here. I've heard about flexibility, reuse of heat. So I think that's going to be expected even more from us.
Louise?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that data center needs to be seen as kind of a part of a wider system, and specifically the energy system. I think there's so much more that the data center can give back to a certain extent to communities, and that way I think data centers can also change a bit the way they're perceived within communities and just more generally how they're talking about. So could not agree more. That's essential for data centers to be able to continue to operate.
Have you seen any examples of that working well in practice?
Well, yeah. So we have 2 data centers in Germany where we've now developed heat network projects. So we're actually because there is a tension between the timeline of a data center operator to come online and the timeline that it takes for a heat network operator to generally bring a heat network online, we have kind of taken it upon ourselves to build a heat network in Frankfurt. Well, it's in Eschborn, so just outside of Frankfurt. But we are partnering basically with the city directly, and we are building this heat network, and we are going to be delivering heat to a swimming pool, which is obviously very fortunate in terms of client, but also to kind of a commercial building that's on the way. And we have a similar project in Stuttgart where we're partnering as well with the city and kind of a local player to develop this heat network, and that will be really the beginning of a heat network, and that will then expand into the whole industrial area. So I think that really changes how we're perceived, but obviously there's much more work that needs to be done. There needs to be an alignment amongst ourselves and kind of the heat industry in general that isn't particularly developed. So I think in the Nordics you're probably much better off than we are, but overall in Europe, where we are located, there aren't a lot of heat networks kind of ready that you can just plug and play into it. So it really is for us to take the responsibility to explore, does it make sense to have a heat project? If so, then what does it take to actually develop that heat project rather than just saying, oh, there isn't anything. Okay, well then let's move on and just build our data center. So there's definitely something to do around that.
Just to add on, I think it's not easy in the Nordics either. I think it's a hard task. But the thing is, working on this problem solving with the municipality, with the local district heating company, showing that you really want to make this happen, that's also where you're creating that kind of stakeholder engagement, showing that we really want to do, to participate. So I think it's important.
Are you finding that municipalities, etc., are aware of those opportunities, or are you having to really go to them and say, look, what we can do with this technology?
It's been us driving that process, but I see a shift now. So I see a shift from the politicians, from the district heating companies, from the regulatory side, that they are starting to be aware of this and the potential. So yes.
Amazing. They're seeing the great work and saying, hey, bring some of that over here. Andy, what's your perspective on the whole thing?
I think you're absolutely right. There is a developing problem and friction about data centers, and the answer is not to stop building them and stop using them, because they do enable, a digital life, working from home, AI innovation and so forth. So it's about how do you find mutual value with the data center and the society in which it's in. And I love the points about the harvesting the heat for other sources. And I've got a customer who is harvesting ocean-borne plastics, taking it out the ocean, and that becomes a medium for 3D ink printing, and they're able to print server racks and storage racks. So it's all about that reciprocity, circularity.
Yeah, circularity. Yeah.
Thank you. So that it's that circularity which I think will drive different messages.
I think we were going to try and find some topics that we can disagree about.
I don't find that very frequently in sustainability people, I'll be honest with you. Tend to be lots of panels agreeing with each other, but I'm on board.
Yeah. I think what has changed in the past few years is that actually people understand a lot more about what data centers are. We have a site that's it's got a sign up. It's right by a main train line between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and yet so many kind of planners have not noticed it. So suddenly there's a shift in awareness of the new planning applications that are coming through that are a lot of them are completely different scale from what we've seen in the past, which is part of why there's a growing recognition of the part that data centers play in the digital infrastructure. So I think that's a good thing, and I sort of welcome increasing awareness, increasing concern, increasing challenge, because it helps accountability, and it helps us put in those structures to make sure that we do the absolute best we can in delivering those services in a responsible way.
No hiding behind anonymity anymore. Yeah. We couldn't have a panel on sustainability in data centers without talking about resource hunger. So I want to dive into that now. Energy, water, space. How can we manage that relationship between demand growth and resource depletion? Louise, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Sure. So I think what's happening at the moment is that there's more and more awareness about those various resources that we're pulling on as data centers. And I think we are increasingly being challenged on each of those. But at the moment, it's really hard to quantify when you look. Coming from the other side, I would have said it's really hard to understand what is the data center that I'm talking to, the data center operator. What are they really delivering, right? Is it all talk, or how do you see what they're, what are they delivering? How do you compare them against others? At the moment, the only metric that is really out there is PUE. Is the only metric that people understand. If you move beyond PUE, then it all becomes talk, and no one knows, is it good, is it not good, and it's so hard to compare. So I think, there's no doubt, right? The resource constraints, the power hungry, water hungry, whatever you want to call it, all of these elements are increasingly being scrutinized, but what is really missing is something that puts that into perspective so that we can compare how we're doing and so that we can create some clear kind of structured way forward to reducing or to being accountable, even more than just reducing, to being accountable for how hungry each data center is in each of the resources, but also so that there's an understanding that there is a competition between these resources, right? If you say, for example, you do not use water in your data centers or you only closed loop systems, right? That's great. But actually, what does that mean? That also means that you're most likely to be using more energy or more electricity than if you were using water for cooling, evaporative cooling or similar type of technologies, right? So there's something that needs to be put into perspective so that you can understand that actually you not using water in itself as a statement is not a good thing per se. It's a good thing when you put it in relationship with all of the other things, right? With understanding the location where these data centers are, how resource constrained are these locations, what are you competing against, what is your grid? Is your grid all nuclear, like in France? Well, then your actual power kind of producing the electricity is really water hungry, right? So there is a tension around that. So maybe in the north of France, it's more okay to use water than when you're, on the coast in the south, right, where there's a real water stress. And so bringing all of that together, I think, is the challenge that we have today. At nLighten, we've kind of put together a metric that is trying to quantify better and to be more transparent, frankly, about the resources that we use. So we've created an ICFN metric, which is trying to bring together kind of the 24/7 CFE scoring, which basically looks at where your electricity comes from every hour, so moving away from kind of certification, but hourly time-matched electricity, then brings together the element around heat. So are you exporting heat? Are you being penalized unfairly in your PUE because you're exporting heat and the boundary is not where the PUE regulation wants the boundary to be? And then are you feeding back into the grid through your backup assets, right? So that's a sustainability metric that we've created to try and work towards that, but we're well aware that this is not covering everything, right? There's so many competing resources at all times, and I think that's really what we need to grasp. It's not just saying we're power hungry. Where are we power hungry? Where should we be using what type of technology so that it is, as you say, location specifically adequate?
Do you think this ties back into that conversation as well about working with communities and like localized infrastructure?
I think it's a lot about localized infrastructure. I think that while it's really important to bring communities in and it's important for a license to operate, I think there's also really a responsibility within the industry and within our customers to demand these things, to move things forward, because I think it's also not realistic to think that the communities will be involved and will be checking all of our metrics. They have 100 other things to do, in their lives that does not involve you as a data center, right? We're not that important. So I think it's really for us to take on that responsibility as a sector.
Andy, what's your perspective?
I think that PUE is quite limiting because it doesn't take into account all the vectors required, and I think that it's what's in the data center as well which contributes to the demand of power, and I think that I can almost see customers being ranked by their own efficiencies within a data center, and so this customer is architected for low power and so on, therefore gets charged a lower price and so on, so you can differentiate that way. The fact is data centers are resource hungry, that's nothing new. And so what will change is the realization that I don't believe there's a magic wand that will just sweep it all away. It's the aggregation of lots and lots of small gains from a range of technology providers, the sort of physical stuff, the power, the water and so on, the space, but also the compute and the storage inside as well.
Helen, what do you think?
So yeah, the intensity is there because of that consolidation of all those processes, all of that technology, the compute that's happening into the single facility, and there's a lot that that's always intensive. It's intensive for energy, water. It's also intensive for metal. I mean, data centers are heavy.
I've never tried to pick one up.
And we need to also bear that in mind in terms of the materials impact, and it's not easy to bring all of that together. The supply chain, I'm sure there's lots of people here who are part of the data center supply chain, is so complex These are global processes. These are using minerals from all over the world, across the world so many times to get into that data center, that single place. So yes, it is intensive. The scale of data centers is an important thing because, you might not always need to have that 500 megawatt, gigawatt campus. There may be disaggregation, especially things like edge inference capabilities that help to avoid those point pressures on the energy and water grids. So part of it is thinking about the right sizing, but part of it is acknowledging that technology has impacts.
I want to dig in more, just a tiny bit more in. Louise, I'm intrigued about this metric, and you've called it a sustainability metric, which is why I'm going to come to you first on this one. How can we avoid addressing sustainability as a silo and work at looking at it holistically across strategy, operations, impacts? And I guess this comes into the sort of the metric side of things.
Honestly, if I had the answer to that, it'd be. I mean, for me, the reality is more that everyone always comes at, evidently because of the pressure that we are to deliver on that data center piece, everyone is really interested in delivering what they're supposed to be delivering. You want to deliver power, you're a power specialist. You want to deliver heat, you're a sustainability specialist. And so you come in with your siler and you look at it and you're like, I'm going to deliver this way, right? But there's very little effort to bring things together. And, I come from a much more energy background than data center background. And in the energy sector itself, it's exactly the same issue, right? Everyone works in their little silo, and system thinking is not something that we're particularly good at overall. Overall, especially when you're under pressure, you tend to just deliver what you were told to deliver and kind of go with it. So until we aren't kind of ready to acknowledge the impact that we have overall and make sure that we're judged upon that impact, I don't know how we're going to become more system thinking, holistic thinking, whatever you're saying.
Stina, I feel like you've got...
No, I've been thinking, I've been in this role for 5 years, and it's been quite frustrating trying to navigate what is a sustainable data center, what is the right KPIs, what is like the level that we should aim for, and it's really hard because the map is not ready for us, like we're trying to figure out as we go. So for us, we're trying to focus on building our own kind of, this is what we think is the material part for us in bulk, developing in the Nordics. And of course, it's a different kind of, we have a good starting point with the renewable, 100% renewable energy almost in the grid from the hydro. So we'll be focusing on other aspects, as for example, emissions from the construction side. We have seen that for us, location is the most important thing regarding sustainability. Where do you start off the due diligence with site acquisition, looking into the nature part? That's coming up on the agenda for the last couple of years, but I think we're kind of getting lost in just focusing on some of the KPIs like PUE. We need to kind of lift up that discussion, and but it's hard. It's hard to agree on what is a bare minimum and what is the ambitions that we should have going forward. So, but I think it's important that everyone try to contribute, try to develop, and try to push this agenda to figure out what is a sustainable data center.
Helen?
And that it's not just for sustainability teams to manage. So as Louise said, the silos is an issue. And the metrics and the frameworks that we create, I worry that they can just make it easier to delegate sustainability rather than to integrate it into all the conversations it needs to be in. I was at a panel yesterday at another conference talking about data centers without the focus on environmental sustainability, and I was disappointed at the questions that did not get asked. about the broader impact of the scale of development, the pace of development, and how it's possible to do it responsibly. So, I welcome these discussions, but actually sustainability needs to be on our clients' agenda, our suppliers' agenda, enabling the joined up conversations and the joined up thinking about the whole of the process, not just the data center process, but the technology process and everything that goes into that.
I wonder actually if we can sort of get a grasp of where the audience is on that. Can you put your hand up for me if you work in sustainability, if you're in a sustainability team, if that's on your agenda, if that's on your workload? That's so few. Well, I mean, great to see that so many people are here who don't work in sustainability, who want to learn more about it. Andy, I know that we sort of spoke a little bit before the panel about where that onus sits, where that responsibility sits, and how. What's your perspective? I know we've sort of run away from the question, but
Yeah, I think that I think you're absolutely right when you said it's not just about technology. It's about a system, a systems thinking that includes everyone. Everyone acknowledges that it's an important factor. I think that's how we drive change. It's not because there's a department added on to a data center organization. It's because everyone believes that it's important. And actually, I take encouragement from the fact that there are so few people who call themselves environmental in this room. It's important enough that they've all come and join the audience. So I think that's a good thing. So yeah, that's how I see it.
I completely agree. I spend my life at sustainability conferences, so I was quite scared to be with all the data center people, but it's great to have you all here. Go on, sorry, Stina.
No.
I think I was just going to
sorry.
say, I actually think everyone should have put their hand up. Because actually, in reality, everything that you do has some sort of connection with sustainability. And I feel like just sustainability has a kind of a stigma in the word itself. That means that no one put their hand up because that's not revenue generating in your mind, and therefore that's not your responsibility. But actually, sustainability, in the way that it includes energy, is the biggest OPEX for most of you if you are data center operators. So really, it is all of your role to be more sustainable, to drive down your overall energy consumption, but also to make sure that you're buying the best energy and the cleanest energy, which is often also the cheapest energy at all times. Not trying to lecture here, but felt like a good moment.
We'll get you a soapbox, it'll be great. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about biodiversity. We've sort of mentioned infrastructure and buildings and obviously resource depletion. Data center expansions, as we're seeing more of them being built, they are competing with nature for land, essentially. How can we integrate biodiversity into designs? And can we see data centers actually improving local ecosystems rather than disrupting it? Andy, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, very briefly, I think that we've discussed already, sharing heat. It's that kind of measure which I think will integrate data centers far more than anything else, than any kind of posturing or any claims. It's the realities of, we've got this heat, we share it with you. Yeah.
Helen, what do you think?
So we haven't been building from scratch. We've been expanding both through acquisition, but also through fitting out high density spaces in existing buildings, which doesn't involve kind of cutting trees down or converting any sort of land use change. So it's not something that I have that close perspective on, but actually that approach of, your smaller data centers, you don't have to always build a brand new facility. So, making use of what we got is really good principle about respecting the environment.
From Norway, nature is really close to heart, so that's high on the agenda. And for us, building campuses for scalable AI, there will be areas of nature. So it's important, as I said, with the location, place yourself close to the power hubs, so you don't need to take more nature for grid to bring that power lines to the campuses, and always do it in a respectful manner. Like you need to do the ecological assessment, you need to look into it. We actually have adopted a methodology from the UK regarding nature accounting. So Norway have now starting to adopt that. So we have tested that for our last site, and then from that planning, mitigation, actions. And I think you will see, as for heat reuse, I think you will see data center also engaging outside the fence, restoration, reestablishment. I think that will be also something that the society will require from us.
And Louise?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit in the same situation that Helen, that we don't really, we've never really had a greenfield data center, or not for the moment in any case, and therefore that, you know, we're keeping the buildings as are, so the carbon that is in that building is remaining, and then we're restoring, and so there's very little impact on the environment and the direct biodiversity. So
Great, brilliant.
I should say we put up a Swift box. We did that.
Nice. We've already touched a little bit on circularity. AI hardware obviously becoming obsolete every 2 years. How can we combat this e-waste crisis, and how can we include circular economy principles in facilities? Do you want to?
If AI hardware is expiring every 2 years, I mean, that's not a data center, that's a supply chain issue.
But as we're seeing these technology upgrades, and as we're seeing the new things come in, we are.
The pace of change is making it difficult to know what's going to be of value in the lifespan of the infrastructure that we provide. So, you know, again, the answers are about supply chain engagement, collaboration, and how we use resources, our attitudes towards those resources, because, you know, they are precious.
Dina?
Yeah, I think again it's the customers. We need to provide them with an ecosystem locally where we are. So again, I think that's an opportunity for a new supply chain. Like, I would definitely, if you're wondering what you will look into, I think to start up that supply chain, there's already things going on, but I think we need to see, yeah, that will scale as well as we grow.
Louise?
yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think that's actually one of the things where technology is going to come in and actually be quite helpful, I think, because it will hopefully enable better reuse and kind of better structuring so that you can reuse more easily. So really thinking of end of life at the beginning, and not really end of life, but that circularity. I think that's where technology really needs to come in. But from our side as well, right, we don't really own the IT infrastructure. We own the kind of building. We own the infrastructure you come and bring your equipment into, right? So it's hard for us to influence. We can inform, and we have probably a duty to do so, but it is not our infrastructure directly that we would be renovating at that speed.
That being said, you know, I think one of the most important things that we do environmentally and otherwise is that custodianship of the kit. You know, the way our data center teams look after the environment, they think about the air quality, they think about all the things they're doing to protect what's in our data centers to keep that running. That's environmental too.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy?
I think that you're right, there is a cycle of refresh of processors and this sort of thing, and it's between 2 and 5 years. So to keep up, you need to keep on rebuying. But going back to what you said about it's a system thinking, it's more than just technology. It's the important thing is, I think, manufacturers like Seagate are more and more designing products that can be repaired, can be upgraded very easily without rip and replace. And we're also finding that a lot of the components inside a hard drive can be reused. So we recycle the drives, for example. And I think it really talks to the fact that I don't think change will happen because we've got good intentions. I think it will happen when boardrooms see the change affecting their bottom line, right? So Seagate's posture on that is we do this not because we're nice people, although we are. We do it because for very real reasons, right? Graduates coming out of university want to work for sustainable companies or companies that practice sustainability. So the war for talent we can have a bigger play there. The finance community, they invest in companies that they want to have portfolios of investments of environmentally aware companies. So the quest for capital, we can win by doing this. And then obviously all of our customers are asked us to fill out more and more questionnaires about what is our stance on this and that. So that for customers as well. So what we're finding is it's not just a nice to have, it is fundamental to our business. And I think that system level thinking, designed for repair, is actually, if you can repair something, that's actually a bigger impact than a recycling activity. So it starts from the manufacturers, not just the data center owners and builders.
And that's about supply chain resilience as well. I mean, what's really interesting in the whole sphere of sustainability right now is that tension, as you mentioned, between is it enough just to have values, just to be nice people, or do you need a business case? And actually, a lot of the time, what I hear is that you need that business case. So, what if the sustainability in the business case doesn't match up? Resilience is increasingly a term that is used in sustainability to structure those business cases, because that's a sort of clear financial term, and that ties in with a lot of the directions that sustainability is going in terms of, if we have a strong circular supply chain that's less exposed to shocks, to scarcity, to changes in how global trade works. So it's interesting to be able to build that into the sustainability conversations.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw it out to the audience quickly. If there are any questions, we've got a microphone if you want to put your hand nice and high so we can see and get that out. There's a couple in the middle at the back there, if we can get a microphone. Perfect.
Hi. One of the sort of topics of this whole conference has been about islanded data centers, so gas, but behind the meter gas. And I'm kind of wondering, there's obviously a trade-off there for a data center about whether the gas solution that you're using is actually going to be breaching your sustainability commitments. And I just wondered if the panel had any sort of comments on how you sort of are balancing that and how you're working on sort of gas abatement on that as well.
Does anyone want to grab that one?
I can take it, yeah. So I actually think it's quite a tricky question. There's really kind of diverse policy around islanding yourself with gas and kind of what you can do around that. So overall, there's on one side, you can see that basically if you only use resources from the grid that are already available and kind of generation assets that already exist, I mean that you're increasingly competing with electrification and other kind of things that are happening, which means that you are pulling the resource towards you. And if you have to build your own little gas generation plant, then there might be a benefit for the rest of the system, right? And at the same time, you can also buy biogas, right? You can buy biogas trading. You can mass balance that in the same way as you do with certificates for the grid, right? So there is kind of an element around that where you can make that work, and there is an argument for that. Personally, I find it a bit difficult to say we've closed or we're increasingly closing gas peaking plants, but at the same time, we're telling data centers that they won't have power until 2035, so they're all going to start building gas. So there's a real tension. I have no solution. I don't know. I think it's a place-specific solution that might be adequate for short term for specific places if done properly. But I think there needs to be a lot of scrutiny and a lot of thinking behind it if you want to justify the use of gas as a base load for a data center. I'm not sure this answers your question. I feel like I just rambled, but that's my take.
Perfect. I think that was great. I think there was some more in the middle there, if we could get the mic back out.
Hi, Steve Costello from HiRef. We're a heat pump manufacturer. It strikes me that the sustainable data centres is a bit of an oxymoron. We're talking about sustainability in an industry that is growing exponentially in its power and resources requirement. And I'm new to this industry. I've only been knocking around in it about 2 years, but 2 years ago I was at one of the big exhibitions, and when I was talking to people about heat recovery, because I'm involved in district heat networks, there was very little interest because the data networks are critical environments, so they didn't want anybody interfering with it. This year I found people to be a lot more open to it, but there is a network out there, an industry out there looking at heat networks where data centers could be talking to them about opportunities to reduce the amount of heat that they're discarding into the atmosphere and getting some money back to start making these data centers more sustainable. But in the future, what does the panel think about legislation limiting the amount of growth that the data center industry can do?
Can I answer the start of that question first? So thank you for talking about the terminology, sustainable data centers. Actually, I don't think that's helpful, because sustainability is about the bigger system. As we keep talking about those silos, it's not that data centers in themselves can be, homegrown and entirely in balance with themselves, because so much goes into them. It's about the macro level, the bigger picture thinking, and that balance at the global scale. So, the terminology that we use to describe what we do can sometimes not help broadening that. And we do all work hard to do as best as we can. But the big picture, we need to make sure that the users of technology and the entire value chain is engaged on doing it responsibly. So thank you for the first part of the question, and I can't remember the rest. Sorry, was it
sorry, the second part of the question is, do the panel think that government will get involved in putting limits on growth? Because at the moment it is exponential. There doesn't seem to be any brakes on it, and as you've said, replace everything every 2 years because we've got something better, faster. Do we need better, faster, and at what point do governments say, well, actually, the environmental impact of data centers is detrimental to the wider good?
I'm happy to take it as well, but right, okay. I know that there's kind of municipalities that are trying to block the development of data centers in Europe because they're basically eating up all of the resources and the grid and all of that specifically. I mean, in Ireland, for example, there are kind of moratoriums that are put in place. But in reality, I think I don't think that there will be kind of a brake that is put on data centers in that way, or I also don't really think it's useful. I think there needs to be kind of a global approach to that. It's not sufficient for a country to say, oh, we don't want data centers. What it really means is that you leave a extremely fast-growing and very investment-heavy industry behind you, which I don't think any European country in any case is in a position to do. At the moment, while municipalities are, kind of going against the development of data centers, central governments tend to want to attract data centers into their countries because of the investment that brings, but also the data sovereignty that is enabled by that, as was discussed in the last panel. I think, that with data sovereignty becoming more and more important, and polarization overall, kind of in a more geopolitical kind of macro level, I don't see there being a break anytime soon. I think it's more of a situation where big growth and then, some companies will fail, or quite a few will probably fail, and then we will find ourselves in a bit more of a stable environment. But at the moment, it's just growth for growth, and I don't really think there will be regulation that is useful in any case coming out to stop that growth.
Just to comment, but I think we'll see that we will have regulations regarding requirement for us to be part of the energy systems, giving system value solutions, and we see that the authorities in Norway, especially, they're trying to navigate now and in close collaboration with us, setting new requirements. So, for example, cost-benefit analysis and heat reuse. We're seeing more and more requirements coming. So I think that is a bare minimum that we need to do the assessment, that we need to look into the solutions. And I think also it will favor the ones that are actually taking this with respect. I think that will also give you, the opportunity to actually grow.
I wonder if it's going to be driven by consumers. You know, if people are making a conscious decision about where their data is being stored and which data center provider is serving up their particular app, maybe that would be it. Because I think the trouble with regulation is that the minute it's printed, it's out of date. You know, technology does move faster than regulators can. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be thinking about these things and trying to impose some control. But technology will prevail eventually, you know, and if I look at data centers, a lot of them are to do with data storage. And there are two technologies on the bench right now, and this is not a Seagate roadmap disclosure, so don't worry, it's common knowledge that there is a viable technology called DNA storage. And right now it's very, very expensive. But you can, if it was a credible product as opposed to a technology, you could certainly store today's internet in the space of the size of a barrel, a beer barrel. And that means then that a lot of the problems about the space and the power required to run it will disappear. So technology will get us there eventually, long term. It's a 25-year sort of design problem. But how to get there in between time, I don't think we have a full answer here.
Amazing. I mean, the role of consumers in sustainability data centers is one of the many things that we could have discussed and we didn't get round to because 45 minutes is not long enough to cover this massive topic. We have run out of time. I do have an aggressive red clock flashing at me. If we could have a nice warm round of applause for our panel, please.
Thank you.